Hey folks, what's up? Everyone talks about Star Citizen, the arguably most ambitious attempt of creating a game ever made. I'm not here to ramble about whether it might fail or succeed. Fact is, we'll find out someday, that's for sure. Today, I'd rather like to shine a light on its roots. Where did the idea come from? Why now and not earlier? Chris Roberts, the mind behind Star Citizen, has a colorful past within the gaming industry. And there is one idea which accompanied him through all his more or less successful projects during the last 30 years. Let's have a closer look. Star Citizen first appeared on the scene in 2012. A Kickstarter campaign was launched and the release date should have been somewhere in 2014. As you probably know, things went a little bit out of hand, and the original couple of $1 million goal exceeded $160 million over time and now is one of the top funded crowdfunding projects ever. If you ignore cryptocurrencies, of course. But we're not here to talk about the present yet. We're here to learn about the game's roots and where the whole idea, art style and setting originates from. To find out, we have to travel way back into the 90s. Back then, Chris Roberts created one of the true industry-changing classics of video gaming, Wing Commander. Wing Commander would be an achievement in many ways. But before the game could write gaming history, it just barely escaped being cancelled. Just 3 months prior to its release, Origin's head of marketing wanted to stop its development. The game had no chance on the market, he said. You can read this myth up on the internet. And in the end, it's just that. In a GameStar interview, Chris Roberts stated how the marketing team was excited about the game's cinematic presentation, which made it easy to sell to the gaming community. A spaceflight simulator combined with a rich storyline was revolutionary for the time. These elements were just two of many more combined to achieve Chris Roberts' vision. A game which breaks with traditional concepts like a game over screen and player lives. A game which immerses the players into its world and therefore dumps a typical user interface or a high score counter. The project was named Squadron, and Chris Roberts decided to use a first-person cockpit view. Polygon graphics didn't look good enough in the 90s, so the choice was made to go with pre-rendered bitmap sprites. The engine shows the ships from different angles and scales them relative to the player's viewport. The results are far from a fluid transition between the sprites as the ships turn and accelerate, but they arguably look better than anything that could have been achieved with a real vector-based 3D engine. 3D-capable graphic cards had not been available back then, and everything had to be calculated by a lone single CPU. Of course, some experiments were made by other developers. A prominent example would be Castlemaster, which used flat-shaded 3D polygons. It looked and sounded like this. And that's Wing Commander. As the path was set for pre-rendered graphics, Roberts turned his head towards the interface. He followed the show-don't-tell principle of storytelling and designed cockpits for each ship. Displays do what they are intended to do. They show the status of your vessel. To immerse players into the game, the pilot's hand copies your movement on the joystick. In case of severe damage, your ship's systems fail. Sparks and smoke burst out of the damaged devices. There's a quote from Chris Roberts commenting this approach on a game's interface. I want what's taking place inside the cockpit to be as real as what I'm trying to show outside in space. I'd rather show you damage as if you were there than just display something like damage 20%. That's abstract. I want to see it. Non-player characters were added for the player to fly with. They already had their own personalities, like a more daring style to fly, and sometimes they even disobeyed orders, clear suicide missions for example. All this together was quite visionary for the time. Alongside with the animated cutscenes and a branching storyline, the game turned out to be a massive success and the start of a multi-million-dollar franchise. Wing Commander 2 kept pushing limits. While the basic formula still stayed the same, it improved in many other ways. The game's characters were animated using rotoscoping. Rotoscoping is an animation technique where animators capture sequences of real-life images and trace over the image manually. It was also used in classic filmmaking to replace objects within scenes. A prominent example is the first Star Wars movie, where the special effects team used it to replace the sticks held by the actors with the glowing lightsabers most of us know and love. To achieve the effect, the technicians traced a line over each frame with the prop, then enlarged the different lines and added a glow. Video games of the 90s had low budgets compared to nowadays. As a result, the studio had to use their artists and programmers to do the cutscenes. There's a scene where Jazz, one of the pilots, gets punched. As the studio crowd all weren't professional actors and not well trained in just pretending to get hit, the guy acting as Jazz got actually hit right on the nose. Of course, that's the take they used in the game, since it looked very convincing. On top of all that, a speech pack was released, which took full advantage of contemporary high-end sound cards. In a time when almost all games just had written dialogue on screen, this blew people's minds. As a result, Wing Commander 2 became an even bigger success. What we can see in both of these games is a certain art style. It's rugged and edged. Surfaces look like they are being stressed every day. One could describe it as a combination of early Star Wars and contemporary military design elements. It was partially carried over to Star Citizen, as we can see in the 2012 Kickstarter pitch. A smart move to effectively bring the past back to life by redoing the launch sequence of Wing Commander 1. I'm sure it made many 90s gamers drop a sentimental tear or two and widely opened their wallets in the process. At least in my case it went like this. Well, now we know where the general idea of immersive spaceflight and the art style came from. But how did the idea grow and develop further? Wing Commander 3 to 5, several spin-offs and even entirely new games were published over the following 15 years. They explored fields of gaming where the first two Wing Commander parts did not or could not go back then because of hardware or funding limitations among other things. But that's it for today. We'll find out more in part 2, so thanks for watching and see you on the next Magnets and Miracles. If you liked the video in any way, then feel free to like and subscribe. As you might know, YouTube removed every channel below 1000 subs from the YouTube Partner Program, so I'd be very grateful if you'd hit that subscribe button to help me grow my channel.